The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for another edition of Need to Know on TKR and broadcasting on all of the Apple platforms. Wherever you're listening, welcome in. It's always an interesting challenge each week to start thinking about a day or so in advance of what the heck am I going to talk about this week. And I really try to not be redundant. I try to just be reactive to what's on my mind and what's gotten my attention. And hopefully, for the most part, that promotes the concept, at least, of not doing the same kind of show every week. But I find myself in this unbreakable pattern right now of needing to talk on Need to Know, need the key word there, of course, about what's happening in our country with the upcoming presidential election and all of the craziness that we've all just seemed to kind of come to a point where we just accept it. All of the absolute nonsense that we endured, and I called it out on this program from day one, of that Joe Biden is vivacious and active and totally engaged. And in the meantime, you had a federal prosecutor declare that he was definitely knowingly in possession of documents that he wasn't allowed to have, but trying him was not going to be a good idea because he's a nice old man, well-intentioned, would be a sympathetic figure for a jury, and really doesn't have the mental perception or memory to even effectively defend himself. So the federal prosecutor suggested that it was better to just let this drop and go on our merry way. Meanwhile, of course, Donald Trump was accused of the same kind of transgressions, possessing documents. But there's a little detail that was very underreported: the fact that the Presidential Records Act allows the president and former president to possess any document that he sees fit. So Trump did have a lot of documents. There were a lot of things that the government thought that perhaps the National Archives that he should give back. He was not refusing to do that, but was kind of negotiating and talking about things that the dispute was over what he should be able to keep and what he would need to return. But the bottom line is there's an act that allows him to have those documents in his possession, where Joe Biden, at that point, where he started possessing top secret classified documents back when he was a senator as early as the late 70s. It's kind of ridiculous that that Trump was indicted on 34 counts and Biden was, he's guilty, but he's not mentally capable, in this federal prosecutor's opinion, of withstanding the rigors of being tried. And at the same time, that didn't disqualify him from being president and unbelievably being the contender for re-election after saying he was going to be a transitional guy and only serve one term. We know the story, how it unfolded. A guy not capable of standing trial for possession of documents that he is lawfully not allowed to have, where, once again, a former president has every right, according to the Presidential Records Act, to have those documents in their possession. So Biden basically stole all of these classified documents from inside the government structure, and that was just kind of overlooked. And he should never ever have been allowed to have those, which was a heinous offense. And yet he wasn't going to be prosecuted. And the case just dismissed in Florida by Judge Cannon recently was trying to prosecute Trump on 34 counts. It just shows you the hypocrisy and the insanity that we are currently living under. The party that is trying to preserve democracy is usurping it at every turn with stunts like this, and also the selective application of laws on our Constitution, in our Constitution, basically picking and choosing the ones that they want to emphasize and completely ignoring and not enforcing the ones they find inconvenient or inconsistent with their policy and agendas. So, with all that being said, again, if I am getting into the redundant territory, and every time you tune in you are cringing that, oh gosh, he's going to talk about the presidential election again, I'm going to have to ask that you indulge me one more week, because things have come to my attention in the last 48 hours that absolutely blow me away. So to develop a theme for this week's Need to Know, I thought we would, for the second time in the history of this show, go ahead and call this Kip Keefer Need to Know Theater of the Absurd, because the things I'm going to talk about today are beyond all realm of sensibility. They are downright examples of absurdity. So let's open up the theater of the absurd for this week. The thing that really set me off in the last 24 hours was a speech that Kamala Harris, the Democrat nominee for president, who hasn't even gone to her convention yet. We know the story, don't need to rehash that. Biden, up until he wasn't, was perfectly capable of another term. Kamala Harris was the biggest cheerleader. I meet with the president every week. He is absolutely cognizant. He is 100% capable of running this country, and he has just done a remarkable job. This is one of the great presidencies of all time. Chuck Schumer called it one of the most consequential presidencies in history. And Chuck, I'm here to tell you, bud, you are absolutely correct. It has been consequential in its destructiveness of our society, of our founding principles, and of people's bank accounts, opportunities, you name it. And also the unprecedented invasion that this administration has not only permitted, but has intentionally, and that's the key word, intentionally triggered by just opening the borders and incentivizing people from all over the world to come in, working in close proximity and tandem with these evil operations that want to see the destruction of America from within. George Soros and many other traditional Euro and Middle Eastern forces, the Chinese Communist Party. This is the strangest group of bedfellows and the most nefarious conspiratorial group of people that are really trying everything to achieve the one common goal when they have very little in common otherwise. And the common goal is the thing that's in the way of world domination. And this is sounding like a James Bond movie. It's a simplistic way to say it. But all these people have great stake in the achievement of tearing down this country, taking away the founding principles, tearing to shreds the Constitution, and making this a global partner, third world kind of country where our freedoms, our liberties, all the things that so many of people of our ancestors fought and died for. It's really just insidious situation now that we're caught up in, and they hide behind all of these accusations of racism and white supremacy and the evil founding of this country, climate change, that our greatest existential threat is the temperature outside, which is just uh, so ridiculously insulting for a planet that's been here more than 4 billion years, that the bleep on the radar that our generations and the preceding couple of generations, that these people are the triggering of the beginning of the end for the planet in our brief appearance here. And I say all this to kind of give you the gist of what I want to talk about, because here's Kamala Harris, who now has gone from being the chief liar, the vice liar of the United States, saying that Joe Biden's in great shape to move forward, when anybody that was dealing with him knew that that was not the case. And all of a sudden, when the polls suggested that Joe Biden, and this is like not just polls that you see on the news or hear somebody talking about, this is the deep research. This is the thorough examination of all of the key components of an upcoming election, that people get paid millions of dollars to provide that data. And it said Joe Biden has no chance in hell, because people are not fooled. People know that he's not up for the task, and his chances of reelection are nil if he runs against Donald Trump. And I think that's why they mysteriously staged the earliest debate in presidential debate history at the end of June, long before either candidate was even officially designated. It was presumed and it was obvious they were going to be the matchup. But that disastrous debate, I don't think was an accident. I think with all of these numbers, they had to push Joe Biden over the edge. They knew he would be a spectacular flop in that debate. I guess they could hold out hope that maybe he would get himself together enough to perform admirably, or at least to the mediocre level that it wouldn't trigger a tremendous negative response, and maybe the numbers would improve. But their real goal, I think, was to expose their dirty little secret that Joe Biden was not fit to go forward, because not because it was anything to do with his condition. They didn't care about that. His condition was just fine because they could just keep him in the shadows, let him go to Delaware for 5-day weekends like they did all the entire time of his term, let him take weeks off at a time to go stay with big donors in Palm Beach or Lake Tahoe. This guy has worked less hours than almost anybody imaginable on a job that's supposed to be 24/7, 365. They have kept that concealed, and it was just fine because he was not the guy making the decisions. He was certainly not the person making the policy. It was this behind the curtain Wizard of Oz concept. They might have had Joe's big mug on the screen as the figurehead in charge, but Joe Biden hasn't been in charge of jack shit, pardon my French. That has not been the case, and now it's blatantly obvious that it's the case, that whoever's running our government, I didn't vote for, you didn't vote for. It's a shadow government. It is mostly former Obama officials and the great Barack Obama himself that have been behind the scenes pulling the strings. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all of the Democrat operatives who have sold out to this worldwide movement of kumbaya globalism. And they are not working for you, the American people, or for the preservation and continuation of this country. They regard the United States as an evil entity that needs great reform. Remember, Barack Obama, the great transformation has begun. It's a new day. The oceans will rise. The stars will shine. Everything is on its way to righteousness. And if that's what you believe, that this country is not the greatest country ever conceived, then I guess you're on board with all of this chicanery and all of these maneuvers and shenanigans that this party now routinely pulls, because the Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party of your father or your grandfather. It is now a party that has sold out and has sold the American people out. And anybody who doesn't recognize that is not paying attention. I don't know how many times I've said it. I'm not political in terms of ideology by nature. I am not a registered Republican. I think right now there is no question that the direction this country needs to go is not in lockstep with this ridiculous last 3.5 years that we've endured of basically opening our country to all of these invaders to try and build these gigantic voter blocks. They're doing everything possible to try to get these people fast-paced to citizenship and giving them driver's license, which in some states equates to registering to vote. There's so many ways that this party is totally usurping the constitutional processes, including free and fair elections. And anybody who doesn't recognize this or is so ideologically blinded that they can't see the truth, you're a person of absolutely zero integrity if you know what I'm saying is true and you're still supporting this movement. I do not do these broadcasts to promote any candidate or any particular party. I think that the reelection of Donald Trump would be a much better formula for repairing this country than the other alternative, which unbelievably is someone so unqualified for the office. We've already seen Donald Trump in office. We've seen what he achieved from a policy standpoint. One of the most successful presidents ever. But of course, with his acerbic personality, and he ruffles a lot of people's feathers. People are not looking enough at issues here, and that's what this campaign's about. It's about issues. This is not, again, a public endorsement for the candidacy of Donald Trump. There's a lot of things to be concerned about in that situation in terms of just the way he kind of conducts himself and his attitude. But as far as the choices we have in this election, a Donald Trump presidency over a Kamala Harris presidency, I don't think you have to be a Rhodes Scholar to see that it is absolutely no choice whatsoever which direction to go. And let me tell you, the theater of the absurd that really touched this off, I heard a speech last night that Kamala Harris gave late Saturday night in Nevada, in Las Vegas, to mostly union members and different people that were convened there. This is a woman who's coming out of an administration that wants to raise everybody's taxes, wants to rescind the Trump tax cuts that were imposed that are scheduled to expire next year. They've added 80,000 extra IRS agents as a result of some political maneuvering that somehow have come to fruition. And one of the targets stated on tape, this is not speculation, they are going to try and look at all Americans and find out where they're dodging tax. And that includes people that work for a living by gratuity, better known as tips. And you remember just a couple of it's about a month ago now, Donald Trump appearing in Las Vegas and staying at his hotel right on the Strip, the Trump, was having lunch with some campaign advisors before an event that night, and the waitress came over to take their order, and he got into a conversation with her about, how things are going, and what are your opinions? How do you think people in Nevada are feeling about the election? And she was telling him about the economic hardships that she and so many of her associates were having. And the point came up of she lives mostly based on tips, being a server. And in the conversation, Trump just said he had a thought, and this is kind of how this guy rolls. Of, what if we had a policy where gratuities, tips, which really aren't direct compensation, they're gifts from other people. Why is that taxable? And everybody at the table kind of looked at each other and said, well, I don't know. And he says, what if we just eliminated the requirement for taxes that have to be paid on tips? Because she had told him that back in the day, in the previous 5-10 years, when every tip was basically cash, I guess technically, if you were collecting cash tips and not reporting them or underreporting them, nobody was really preoccupied with that. It was cash. Somebody handed you a $5 bill or left you a $20 tip. But nowadays, the nobody carries cash anymore. I always had a pocket full of cash. I'm a great example of living in an era where gradually I even gave way. My dad would never be caught dead without a bunch of cash in his pocket, and I had kind of inherited that. But if I don't carry cash anymore, I know nobody else does. A little side story: I was with a friend of mine last 2 years ago at Saratoga race course up in New York for their fabulous summer meeting. And I sent him to the window to go get a trifecta bet for us. And he came back and he said, I couldn't get the bet. And I said, why not? And he said, well, you only gave me $40 and it was $46. And I said, oh gosh, I misfigured that. I said, well, you could have just tossed six in. You knew I'd be good for it. He goes, I don't have any cash. So here's a guy on vacation in upstate New York, and he doesn't have $6 on him. I mean, it's a whole different time. So the point of all that was in her explaining that to Trump, that now everything is done on cards, debit cards, credit cards, etc. That's all documented now. So all of these people that rely on tips and gratuities for their living have been heavily taxed for the first time because the way the system's changed. So Trump that night at his rally announced that he had been giving it a lot of thought, and he was going to, if elected president, eliminate the tax requirement for people to pay that are in the serving industry and pay for tips. And that is a big game changer for not only waitresses and servers and bellmen, people in the hospitality industry, but just think of Uber drivers and people that are in the transportation business, because, I always try to give some cash to my drivers, but a lot of times, I don't have the cash on me anymore, like I mentioned, or I'll just have maybe a 50 and some 20s and perhaps even 100, but I don't have small bills anymore because I just don't go to the bank much. Everything's automated, everything's direct deposit. Society changes, and this suggestion was wildly well received in Nevada, where so many people are relying on tips. So the Saturday night event with Kamala Harris coming out of an administration and still currently active as the second in command in that administration, that had laid out all kinds of policies now for making sure that Americans were paying, and they talk about the rich paying their fair share. Well, the rich pay a tremendous amount already of the tax burden of the country. This is middle class and working people that they are putting a bunch of attack dogs in place to try and turn them upside down and shake loose every nickel that they believe the government has coming to them. She, on Saturday night, just kind of throws out there, and another feature of my new presidency is we will not require taxes to be paid on tips. Okay, Kamala, that was really good. You copycat parrot. That was taken right off the podium where Donald Trump spoke, and Donald Trump declared that about a month ago. Now, all of a sudden, the gigantic tax and spend government, second in command, is adopting that same policy and presenting it like it's her grand gesture of an idea. Did she think people wouldn't say, hey, wait a minute, that was a Donald Trump declaration a month ago? Now she's announcing it like it's some huge revelation. And when you challenge all of this hypocrisy of everything she's ever claimed to support, drilling for fossil fuels, fracking, the border policies, the total decriminalization of people coming into this country. Her exact quote, of course, is, I am here to tell you that people coming into this country are not criminals. Well, we would disagree to a large extent, because the Constitution says if they're not properly processed, they should not be allowed in the country. So technically, anybody entering this country under those circumstances is indeed a criminal, whether you philosophically want to believe that or not. Now, that same candidate is saying, we got to get tough on the border. We've got to enforce our border policy. That has been completely the antithesis of everything that she has said over the last 10, 12 years that she's been in the public spotlight, and especially the last 3.5 years that she has been number 2 in this government hierarchy. So she is completely doing an about face. Her campaign staff is saying, look, we've got to move you from your extreme left positions, which are not, again, speculation. We have got hundreds and hundreds of examples of her declaring the most leftist, socialist, Marxist policies imaginable. And now they're trying to package her as some kind of middle of the road moderate who's going to come in with all these ideas. And you have to find it the theater of the absurd on the marquee, the way they defend that. And when I say they, it's the manipulators of the campaign. It's the real powers behind the scene. They're trotting out spokespeople to say, well, you have to respect her, because in the years she's been in public life, like all of us, our perceptions and opinions change. We become more open to different ideas, and she's just evolving as a politician and a candidate and a person, and has reconsidered a lot of her previous positions. That is absolute hokum. It's absolute bunk. It's absolute, pardon my French, bullshit. This is not a person who has changed her stripes and had some great epiphany of everything she's ever supported being totally dead solid wrong. That's just laughable. We know who Kamala Harris is. If you've paid attention, you absolutely know what her record is. She says she'll put her record up against Trump's any day of the week. Well, that would be kind of laughable, because her record is so far left and so radically out of touch with everything this country stands for, because really the bottom line is her basic platform is this country's evil, this country's racist, this country needs to have equity and fairness and all those things, and all of it's great to talk about. But in a capitalist society founded on the principles that we are all accustomed to, for her to about face and start declaring now all this economic relief and energy exploration that she has been adamantly opposed to, it is just the biggest fake situation that's ever been created. And we already know these people are coming off of the great facade and illusion that Joe Biden was a 100% cognizant and could outwork anybody that you mentioned, and just was a go-getter, dynamo, whirling dervish of accomplishment and activity. And all of a sudden, Joe's not up for the job. We're going to pivot to Kamala. That has, again, nothing to do with Joe's lack of ability, which anybody paying attention recognized 3 years ago. This has to do with if they changed horses in the middle of the stream, if their fighter was getting a standing 8 count and getting ready to get knocked out, they did a quick substitution, fast-tracked Kamala into that spot because they had no choice. They much rather would have reached out for a Michelle Obama or a Gavin Newsom, or perhaps even, I can't believe this, Gretchen, whatever her name is, Wisber, the governor of Michigan, who's just a deplorable character. But no, they had Kamala locked in the vice presidency, and they could not go back on that commitment to her. It's kind of like they planted this minefield that would be a really difficult thing for others to criticize or work against. But when they finished the minefield and the Joe Biden ruse fell apart, then they had to basically take careful steps backwards over the treacherous landscape they had just created. And they step on one of these mines that they put in place for protection just about every day. And so the tip declaration was unbelievable. Americans also need, as we get close to wrapping up here, Americans also need to consider what she said earlier in the week about prices and inflation in this country, which we know is a huge factor. And did it get your attention, or did you hear her declare that on day one of the Kamala Harris administration, the first priority for me is to attack these high prices, to get prices and cost of living down for Americans? It's outrageous. She's campaigning against her own administration and the policies that she has put in place, along with the other, proprietors of this scam that Joe Biden was running the show and making policy. Well, I mean, she owns that because she was vice president and was affiliated with Joe Biden. And now this high prices are unacceptable. Earth to Kamala, you're still the vice president. Why do you have to wait till January 20th, 2025 to implement the war on high prices? Where the hell have you been the last 3.5 years? Why have you not been attacking prices from day one of this administration when they skyrocketed? Why are you letting people pay 40, 50, 60% more for groceries and gas and electricity and whatever kind of power needs they have? All these are real costs that everybody listening knows exist. What the hell? I'm going to start on day one to start attacking these prices and make living more affordable for Americans? You're already in office. You're campaigning against your own policy. It is absolutely the epitome of the theater of the absurd. That's enough ranting and raving for this week. I hope some of those points resonate. This is a Trojan horse of massive, massive proportions. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are not what they're representing themselves, and their handlers are representing them to be. This is the furthest, most unimaginable far left ticket ever proposed for the White House. And anybody who buys the BS that they're anything other than that are simply intellectually insufficient or just turning a blind eye to the blatantly obvious. Remember the old slogan, is the reason that you're not really interested in who your leaders are and your country, is it due to ignorance or indifference? And anybody who answers that question with "I don't know" and "I don't care," That's the problem. You need to start knowing, you need to start caring, and need to know is a good place to start. I'm Kip Kiefer. Thank you, as always, for listening, and God bless America. Let's open our eyes. Let's make the right decision. Let's not make the United States of America star in the next edition of Theater of the Absurd. Have a great week, everybody.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.